Scientists, let's take a look at recording and using macros. Before we look at the actual implementation of it, let's just review what a macro is. A macro is a packaged set of commands. Imagine that you're always doing similar commands on a Microsoft Office Word document, for example. Let's say you're always aligning the paragraphs in a certain way, doing a funny spacing, applying some kind of formatting. You know how to do that through the menu structure and maybe even keyboard shortcuts. But what if there are several commands, or maybe there's a command that there's not a keyboard shortcut for? How can we make that better? You know, computers are tools for productivity and efficiency, so let's create our own tools to do that. So let's bring up Microsoft Office Word document file. First of all, in order to record a macro, you have to have the Developer tab available. Oftentimes the Developer tab isn't part of the standard installation of Microsoft Office Word. So go to your File tab, and under Options, you notice it starts at General. Go down to Customize Ribbon. And here under Customize the Ribbon, you want to ensure that you have the Developer tab open. Oftentimes it won't be selected by default, so just be sure it's selected, say OK, and the Developer tab will appear. When we go to the Developer tab, what we'll notice there is the ribbon changes. That's a common thing in Office products. The ribbon, the submenus will change based upon what's going on with the main menu here. You can see on the left part of the ribbon is this code idea. We're going to record a macro. But before we record a macro, we need to know two things. Number one, what problem are we trying to solve? And number two, how can I do that manually via the command structure interface? So let's try something here. If I haven't shown you this trick before, the =ran command, notice what happens when I press enter. This just gives me some random text, and now I could do things with it. For example, let's say that we want to do two things to this paragraph. Let's say we want to, I don't know, triple space it. And let's say we want to change the margins, decrease the left and right margin by another 1.5 inches. Hope I can remember what I just said. So how would you do that? Well, you know that you don't have to select the entire paragraph. As long as my cursor is in the paragraph, any paragraph formatting happens with that paragraph. So here's my cursor somewhere in this second paragraph. I'm going to pull out the paragraph settings, pull out that flyout, and now let's make our changes. What did we say? I've already forgotten. 1.5 inches left, 1.5 inches right, line spacing. Oh, they don't have triple, so what are we going to do here? Well, we'll do multiple at 3. There it is. Now, if we did that constantly, a number of times in every document, that'd get a little tedious. So let's create a macro that will automatically package those commands for us and allow us to run everything with a single command, and ultimately even with a keyboard shortcut. By the way, I'm going to undo. You know how to do that. Control-Z on the keyboard. And now, one tip, by the way, let me just break out these paragraphs so you can see them a little better, is before you record a macro, position your cursor, unless positioning the cursor is part of the command structure you want. We'll see that. So now let's go to the Developer tab. I position my cursor. Let's issue record macro. When the record macro window comes up, two important things. Well, three important things. First of all, I advertise giving it a name that reflects what it does. Let's just say my paragraph formatting. That's not a good name, but it's not the default. We'll talk about these later, or as a matter of fact, I'll have you investigate these macros to button and keyboard later. Now this is important. Where should we store the macro? You would think all documents. All documents will put it in a special place on your computer that is accessible to all other documents on your computer. But let's say you wanted to give this macro to somebody else. And that's what you want to do in assignments for me. I need to see your macro. I can't see your computer. So what you're going to do is, rather than all documents, this normal.m, that's the normal template. And that's on your computer. So I'm going to put it in the current document, which for me is document 2. The other important thing is to comment it. Give it a description. Macro, which will... what's it going to do? I already forgot. Triple space, paragraph, indent 1.5 inches more. Include the name, include the date, and perhaps the company. This is important. Documentation is an important part of being a computer scientist. Now, once I select OK, make sure you're ready to roll. I oftentimes ask students, do you know what that little icon is next to the pointer? That's supposed to be a cassette tape, right? That means we're recording now. Good for us. At this point, I could either use the command structure or keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to notice my cursor is already positioned. If I move my cursor now, that movement will be part of the macro. So I'm going to go back to the home menu, just as we did before. Pull out the paragraph. I'm going to change my left and right indentation. Yeah, that's too much. Let's change our line spacing. Issue OK. Now at this point, you're saying same thing. But watch. I'm going to switch back to the Developer tab. Notice where before I had Record Macro, it's now Stop, or I can pause it if I need to do some things and repeat it later. I'm going to stop recording. I claim at this point that I have a macro that will do exactly this. Let's try it out. Let's put our cursor in the first paragraph. And now, still in the Developer tab, if you're in some other tab, just select Developer for that menu. And now notice we won't record a macro, but let's go to Macros, Alt F8. Here's a listing of all the macros either on my system or connected to this document. If I had multiple ones, I'd select it. This tells me what it does. Watch what happens when I issue the run command. Voila. Excuse me, it does exactly what we expected it to do. Now you're saying, how is that helpful? Well, from this point on, I could just repeat that wherever I need it. And I don't have to go through Developer, Macro, Run. I can assign my macro to a button or to a keyboard shortcut. But that will be for you to investigate. Oh, one final thing. So now I have a macro connected to this document. When I save my document, let's just say I'm going to, let's just say I'm going to save it on my desktop here. Notice when I try to save it, it says, whoa, you have a VBA project that won't be saved. VBA is Visual Basic for Applications. What Word is telling me is the macro that I embedded into this document won't be saved with the document. So we need to save it as a macro-enabled file. Continue saving as a macro-free document? Nope, don't want that. So instead, change your type. Look at this one here, Word macro-enabled. I don't want the template necessarily. Aha! How about this one here? Word macro enabled document. That's what I want. Save this. And now What I can do at this point in time is I can now upload that document to anybody like me, and then I'll be able to see your macro and run it. Think about what we just did. I encourage you to practice this. Maybe do exactly what I did and ensure yourself you can do that. And then take a look at the homework assignment. And as always, you got questions, comments, or concerns, please contact me. Good luck, computer scientist. Keep creating.